G'day and welcome to another one of our MC19 videos. Now the story so far, we've got our MC19. We checked the engine out thoroughly, had a look at the cooling system, and we put it together and we fired it up. And that was a fantastic first step. Because when you get yourself a project like this, if there's something wrong in here, then you're adding potentially hundreds, if not over $1,000 onto the repair bill. But I'm at a bit of a crossroads right now, because we've discovered that the motor seems to be quite good. It's been fired up probably 4 or 5 times since the video showing the initial startup, and every time I fire it up it gets better as it blows its cobwebs out, so to speak. These carburetors were dry for a long time, and I think that's about 50% of it, that the carburetors simply just needed a bit of an opportunity to clean out, and to be honest, I'm quite happy that I don't have to dismantle them and kit them. There's 4 of them. It's not just a case of kitting a carburetor and throwing it back in like we saw on our CBR250R. It's more about making sure that the carburetors are all in sync with each other and each one's individual mixture is correct, and that can be a little time consuming to get 100% spot on. Generally, once these carbies are set up, I have to add, that's it. They don't go out of tune really easily. I've seen bikes that have got double the kilometres that this thing has, and their carburetors have never been touched. So there's no point in repairing something if it simply isn't broken. And that's something you should always bear in mind with your antics with motorcycles, is that if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Seriously. I've seen some really classic examples of things that were not broken that got fixed and were never quite right again. But I'm sort of contemplating where to go from here. If I do a complete restoration, I mean, it's easy at this point to drop the engine out of this. I can see the thing is quite laid out in front of me. I could drop the engine with carburetors and I could polish the frame. These things aren't in a bad state, but what you end up with is something that you become loath to ride. Consider that for a second. Now here's something different for you guys to enjoy. This dusty little gem here is a VT250FJ. So it's basically like the Sparta's predecessor. So this is an FJ. On the scale of things, the Sparta is an FL. And then of course from the FL we switched over to the VTR. So this is the original V-twin, and the Sparta's engine, although they're very similar and use similar castings, they are actually slightly different, the engines. The Sparta's engine is more like a VTR engine, and there is actually interchangeability of parts between all 3 of them. So this is the granddad here, so it started around about 1982 with the VT250F, which was a unfaired, sort of like a bikini fairing little V-twin, and it progressed to this one, which was the last of that line. And so this is the FJ, then the FL, which was the Sparta. The Sparta was a bit unique, where it has the Castech frame on it, and then from there the VTRs have a trellis frame, but not cast aluminium like the Sparta's is. Now this little gem here, and I as I said, it's covered in dust. This is a complete restoration. If you have a close look at this, you can see that everything is painted and it's in a beautiful state. All it really needs to finish it off is I'm still looking for a windscreen for it. I need to get the seat recovered, and there's a sticker kit that will give me the full VT250 stickers over the paint that I put on it. So she's a little dusty, and it spends a lot of time in a corner in the garage. And the reason for that is that I restored it, I put full registration on it, and I drove it around for about 2,500 kilometres, and then some imbecile cut me off in traffic and made me sort of rethink it all. Now, this bike was restored using new old stock parts. The engine was reconditioned. Everything is like new or original. Then there's stuff like the exhaust pipe. You can see we have the original pipe on it. So if it was worn out, it was replaced with a genuine Honda item. If it was in good condition, it was restored and cleaned up. Now, the only difference on this bike between an Australian VT250FJ is the front fairings. The Australian release has the indicators on the fairing there. This has got an American VTR 250 set of fairings on it, and the American front indicators. So the Japanese and Australians had editions had the indicators in a different place. I don't know why that is. Different markets, different compliances, I guess. But what you're looking at here is a significant investment in time and money, and I'm disinclined to ride it because it just takes one idiot to destroy all that good work. So, do we want to take our MC19 down that path? That is a really good question. I spent over a year restoring this bike in my spare time, and I really enjoyed the time that I spent on it, and I can tell you it is absolutely fantastic to ride. But do we want to step down that path with another bike? Do we want to end up with something that we're too scared to ride? Or do we want something that can still put in some practical time on the road? It's a good question, isn't it? So we'll banish the VT250FJ back into the Yamaha corner of the workshop. And I suppose I really should get around to giving the thing a wash and putting its cover back on it. So I think we've really answered our own question there. I think what we need to do is sort this bike out so it can be ridden. That's really what it's for. I need to get rid of this thing too. It's just too gaudy for me. So, where do we go from here? I think we need to make sure that the bike is not going to corrode. This rear subframe here, it's looking a little dodgy. It needs a coat of paint. Other than that, I reckon we should set her up to ride. That's what it's for. And that's just the beginning.